everybody.
Hi, Angus. Welcome, everybody. We do have a quorum. We're waiting for Joan and Beverly, but I'd like to call the meeting to order at, let's see, what's the time here? Oh, it is really 11:06 a.m. Joining us today are Angus McDonald, Laura Francis, Ed Bailey, Susan Tyler, representing the Joint Committee. Also in attendance, Leslie Strauss, the chairperson of Estuary, and Joe Comerford and Dave Lee. So welcome everyone, and belated Happy New Year. Next item on the agenda is a review of minutes. You must have felt like you were drinking from a fire hose to look at all these things. As we agreed before, this committee's not going to accept or adopt these minutes. Our respective full boards will do that. So these are really being sent out for you all to read at your leisure and forward any inaccuracies or suggestions you might have to Joe. And it includes the minutes of all the joint meetings thus far, plus 3 meetings of the Estuary Committee. It does not include any meetings of the Middletown Committee that you might have conducted by yourselves. So I don't want to spend a lot more time on that, but any suggestions or changes or inaccuracies, just forward those to Joe so he can make a change. Number 4, the review of the merger implementation plan. This is the last remaining significant piece of the MOA, which Joe has prepared. It is the last appendix to the MOA. It has been arranged by 3 functional areas, and then by year and by task. And I'll just say a couple more things and then ask Joe to deal with the specifics. It does incorporate all the deadlines that are contained in the MOA, so that there is, if we've asked for something to be done by such and such a date in the MOA, then it's listed here as well on that deadline. It also provides in the MOA for mutual agreement among the parties to change these various deadlines as we move forward. And you'll see from the write-up that the number of tasks included in this project are frankly dizzying. There's an awful lot to do. So Joe, were you able to reach anybody?
Joe's on mute.
He's muted, yeah. Okay.
Susan?
Yeah.
In looking at the agenda that I'm looking at, it does call for this meeting to be at 1 p.m. Did anybody, am I the only one seeing that?
You are. That was an old.
That was an oldie? I'm just
Yeah.
wondering if Joan or Beverly perhaps are working off that by mistake.
Hadn't thought about that. I think we must have picked up that last meeting we had in December was at 1.
Right, and so I have in front of me an agenda for today that still shows 1 p.m. That's
Exactly.
why
Joe,
Okay.
The agenda says 1 p.m.
That's because I took last month's.
I know. Were you able to reach Beverly or Joan?
I left them voicemails.
Okay. Well, let's keep going. I did make a few general comments, Joe, about the implementation plan. And could you take over the discussion on it from that point forward?
Yes. Does everyone have it, or do you want me to put it on the screen?
I think you should put it on the screen.
Okay. Let me get that up. All right. What is this doing? Okay. Well, that's weird. Okay.
It's coming.
Yeah, I don't know. It was acting up. Okay. So we took that, if you remember, there was a chart in the study, and it was a colorful chart.
You're showing a different screenshot.
Yeah.
You're showing the Wyndham MOU.
That's, yeah.
You
That's
had
where I
it a
was-
minute ago. You
Yeah.
had it before.
Oh, let me do this again. That's where I was saying it was acting weird. It's not letting me. Oh, what's going on? Okay, now do you see it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay,
Good, thank you.
all right. So we took that chart and we started by filling that in, and it became really big. So we then split it out into each activity. So if you remember, that chart had 3 columns. One was governance, one was facilities, and one was operations and something else, operations and employment,
Staffing.
Operations and staffing.
staffing. So we took that and we split it out just so we can get more detail without the chart becoming incredibly long and harder to read. So you want to walk through all of it, Susan?
I don't know.
How detailed? It's fairly long, so I don't know how detailed we want to go into it.
What is the sense of the group? Do you want to go through this line item by line item? Or do you want to deal with just the large chunks? I think that, for example, under facilities, the second section, a lot of that is quite specific to design RFPs and X percentage of the project being completed, and it's a bit technical. But I guess what I would suggest is that when it comes on the governance section and maybe the staffing section, we might go line by line just to see if anyone has any questions or suggested changes.
Yeah, I think like an executive summary of each section is sufficient.
Okay.
Joe?
Okay, sounds good. All right, so we'll start with governance. So kind of see, we started from February, figuring that's when we'll send everything over. And let's see, so for I'll just go through it quickly. February is kind of our activities that we know we're already working on, like starting to develop bylaws and sending over the MOA for signature. And then kind of
April and March need to be reordered.
Yeah.
And I wonder, so based on the email that Doug sent back to Susan and I
mean Dennis, yeah.
Dennis, sorry. I know a Doug Solinsky, that's why. Is he expecting a draft of bylaws with the draft of the MOA? That was a little confusing to me.
Yeah.
I don't think he is. I'll explain that. That's going to come later.
Okay.
That we're
All right.
working on them, but the bylaws don't need to be totally done for a while.
Well, and I thought
I mean-
that was basically a local jurisdictional exercise. So I was actually a little bit surprised that he called
No.
that out on that email.
What
Mhm.
he just wants to see that we're moving,
Okay.
and knowing that we're working on bylaws, tells him we're moving.
Okay.
That's right, Laura.
And being serious about it. If he mentioned that too, something about, I forget how he worded it, but basically that to see that we are making progress. I forget how he worded it, but that's really what he wants to see. And And I think he just sees bylaws as one of those things that has to get done. But
Okay.
in reality, those bylaws won't take effect until July
The
1,
merger.
2022. So
Right, right.
we are, by starting them this spring, we are still, by starting them now really, and hoping to finish them this spring or even summer, we are still way ahead. But we were just thinking that because the towns will start to voting this year, that they will want to know what they're getting into, and that way we can kind of say,
Oh,
well,
sure.
if
Oh,
they come and
sure.
say, well, how's the voting going to work? Well, we've already worked that out, and here's what we're proposing for the bylaws. So that was the reason we figured they have to be done a little earlier for our own needs, but
Mhm.
they don't really have to be finalized until later.
Yeah.
Same with due structure. That's why we have the due structure here in April, because same thing, when you're going to your town meetings to say you're going to do this, well, one of the questions is going to be, well, what's it going to cost us? Of
Right.
course. So
Right.
we want to at least have had those dues the structure discussion. And we put due structure because we will probably not set the actual dollar amount of the dues because it's so early, but we'll at least agree kind of in structure what they look like. And so you'll know at least what they're close to. Are they
And
going to go up 2.5%, 3%? That,
Right.
maybe.
That's
But
all why we say here, the board, we can agree on bylaws and member structure without taking any formal action.
right.
on
And
it.
that was another discussion we had, Susan and I, was that so some of the stuff in this phase is going to be that the two boards agreed on these things, but until there'll be some things that until the Middletown towns join estuary, they can't actually vote on things like the bylaws and the dues officially because they're not actually members. So we will all agree to them and then vote on them at a little later.
Okay. Very good.
All right, the item under May repeats that, Joe, so we want to take
Yeah.
that.
So I just deleted that.
Yeah.
So let's see. So then, there's some. Oh, so in June we had that environmental site review if it's needed. Hopefully it's not, as long as they accept the identification language. And so in July, we're asking for that notice of where the funding is going to come from. Again, that was just kind of them.
That, by the way, for everybody, that's a new provision in the MOA that we haven't really discussed yet. But if we do all agree to it, this would be the date it would be due.
And if you remember, this was one of the things Sam had recommended, that we can ask for what the sources of funding are.
Right.
And that's what this is asking for that list of sources of funding. And then some of the studies we went by what the study had initially split them out by. They put some things in governance, some things in operations and staffing. So I left them there because I kind of understood why they were where they were. So we have the RFP for the fair study starting and going out in July, and the marketing and rebranding going out in July. And then kind of when they both begin in September. And we figured it's like fall, around October, we start going out to the towns to actually start the process of joining ETD as of, and then there was a question here too. We said, well, should it be July 1st or June 1st? Because as I said, of the voting thing, that do the towns want to be on in time to vote for, say, the 2022 budget? Because in that case, they'd have to actually join in by June to actually be able to vote on the July 1 budget. So that's just something we have to figure out whether that should be June, July, what that should be. Does it? I don't know. Then not that necessarily has to be defined now in this, but that's why it's June, not July. And then we figured November, the two boards do vote on the bylaws and member dues. again, because the dues have to be done really early, because as you know, the towns start asking us by early January what the request is going to be for July 1. So we figured both boards will vote on that so that we're all in agreement, even though it's really, in the end, it's the estuary that's going to set the dues. We'll both vote and honor them. And then December, start the fair hearings. Hopefully we'll have our fair study done and we could go out to hearings. We get to 2022. We have a joint board meeting for the budget and final acceptance of the dues. Then we start the process of, this is the year we really start the process of the transferring by asking for the approval of transferring assets to FTA and giving marketing. And in June, we had to finally adopt the new combined district budget. And we start on the implementing all the rebranding. And winter, oh, sorry. Now we go back up. There we go. And July 1st, the actual merger happens. And we hope that but July 1, we could implement the unified fare structure. And then sometime in the winter, maybe it's later, they had winter, I just left that. But at some point during that year, we will totally wind down Matt. It might actually be longer, just kind of depends on all the activities needed to wind it down. And then we also figured that during that year, we could start inviting new members to join, not the Middletown current today 3 members, but the ones that are not currently members of either district is what we mean by new members.
So I had one question on this issue of the new reconstituted board. Middletown towns will come into estuary. Do we have on here when the actual new board is formed? Because we have to have that new board in order to approve the budget.
That's where we have, if we accept them as of June 1st, that's when they would, that's where I was saying the date we have to decide what that actual
Okay,
start date is. It could be a little earlier. I don't think you went later.
no, but according to the,
because of the way we're doing things, technically, the estuary board's going to always exist, right? So technically, those towns don't have to necessarily have joined for you to vote on the budget and the dues, because estuary will be voting. I think you'd want those towns to be voting, so they're officially on the record voting. But I mean, technically, no, the estuary board can start accepting these things. That, and that's kind of the things we got to work out, those exact dates and all that. But we're not making a new board.
no,
The estuary board is going to still be there, so the estuary board can vote. It's just who the members are going to be that are going to be eligible to vote. So
I think just want to be sure that the Middletown towns have full standing to participate in and vote on these decisions.
and that
this-
was my thought and why I moved up that, because the study had July 1. But if that's the case, then they can't vote on the
Right.
budget. We could even move it up a little earlier if we wanted to make it May 1, so that because the budget is a 2-vote, it's a 2-meeting process. But
How do people feel about that? Do we want to have Middletown, Durham, and Middlefield vote to join ETD as of May 1st, 2022? Because of that?
I think that makes sense, because I think we're cutting it close by making it June. And if we have to go
Yeah.
through 2-meeting process,
Okay. And then ETD board would vote to accept new towns, obviously, as of May 1st as well. Okay. All right,
yeah, and
everyone,
now, and like the dues for the next year, the ETD board will be voting on. I mean, of course, we'll just have to. That has to happen so much earlier because of when the towns need the requests in, and I guess it got that kind of, we're just going to have to work closely together and make sure that the mat towns are good with what the request is. Totally approve that request, and then the estuary board will vote to officially do it. But
Okay,
so that's going to be some of the transition stuff that happens.
and any other comments on the governance section? Okay, on facilities, there are two important deadlines in there that are pulled from the MOA. One is that the Middletown land acquisition would be completed on, according to this, by May 1st. And the shoreline land acquisition would be completed by September 1st of 2021. We hope those are doable deadlines, but all the rest of those are construction, facility design, kinds of things. And Joe, do you think we need to go through that, or?
I mean, that's up to whoever one wants. Is this a better view? That's up to the committees if we want to
just
go
my-
through
My
each one.
question is, how realistic is that schedule, given, obviously the huge question of state funding availability? But as far as the purchase of,
Well, yeah, the Middletown, we know the Middletown acquisition's funded. Westbrook's not
Right.
yet. So
I guess, Angus, what we would find out is DOT, once they get this, would push back if they felt it was not realistic.
yeah, I think the schedule is doable if they moved right on it, but that's the question. Yeah.
Well, this is our expectations, but, yeah, and of course, if we
And-
don't fund it, then it's not gonna happen.
Yeah. And I pushed back all the dates from what was in the study.
my bigger concern is really, I mean, the funding is the one thing. If the funding's there, they need to move it. I mean, that property doesn't hang around. We saw that in Deep River, we lost that property.
Right. A question for you, Joe. I don't see under facilities a start date for the Middletown construction or a completion date for the the completion date is 2025 for Middletown.
Yep. Start Middletown is winter of 2022.
Sorry. Oh, okay. Alrighty. Good.
Do look, because it's possible I might have missed one. But I think we also have the other thing I moved from the study was the upgrades to the storage facility. They kind of had it going concurrently. I don't know how we would do that. Like how we can't lose everything at the same time. Like I'm thinking we want the maintenance facility open before we take our storage facility offline and start renovating that, was my thought. So I pushed that back so that, so it wouldn't, all the design and all that stuff's happening, but we don't actually start until we're open across the street and have something to work out of.
Okay.
That's why I pushed back. We didn't have 2025 before. That's why I pushed back at 2025, because pushing it back basically a year on that.
Okay. Does anyone have any other comments or concerns about the facilities section? Okay, under operations and staffing, we do have some updates for everyone on staffing, which is a different agenda item, so we'll come back to that later. But a general overview of this section is that it does include all of the studies for under special studies and some other capital request items perhaps that are in the MOA, also consistent with deadlines that are in the MOA. And as you can see, there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done just to let the bids out for these studies, much less oversee them and implement the results and recommendations. So Joe, why don't you give us a quick overview of operations and staffing, because it also includes when people will move from one place to another.
Yeah. So I'll just go right to March.
The hot
'cause
chocolate.
January's kind of done already. So as we kind of discussed last time, our hope is that by March we get the everything we need to hire the HR payroll person and the grants procurement positions. It's also when we formalize having shared management and administrative staff. And the original study had staff moving to the Middletown garage in July, but I moved it up because, you know, if we've got a new maintenance person, new HR payroll, and a new grants and procurement person all out of Middletown, I felt that we probably need to have all administrative staff up there because, you know, I mean, all these new people, we need to kind of start becoming one team, and I got to work with them we got to train them and all that stuff. And that's going to be hard to do while we're still in multiple places. So I moved that up to the same timing that all the staff comes on and we were all up together in one location. And then we have, the funding for the TODs hopefully coming in March as well.
I have a couple of on March to ask people. In March, we talk about formalizing the shared management and administrative staff. You might recall when we did the MOA draft under the transition section, we talked about executing a separate letter of agreement between the two districts. I think that's what that implies. And the other thing was a letter to staff would be sent out. This was recommended by the study to basically inform staff what is happening, what the time frame is for the merger, that, you know, they won't be disadvantaged or disenfranchised. I'd like to get a sense from people as to whether or not you all feel that both of these items require letters, and if so, we can arrange to get something drafted. Anything on the formalization of the shared management? Let's do a letter on that. Are people agreed? Are we agreed on that?
I think it's a good
Yeah,
idea.
I think,
I
yes,
think it's a good idea.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay, letter to staff. Are we agreed?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We'll get drafts of both of those for.
Yeah, it just so it will be more of an update because we did send the initial letter with the, when the study came out publicly, we did put an initial letter telling them, here's what the study recommends and here's what's happening.
Okay.
So this will be the update saying, okay, now we're moving forward on the recommendations and here's what's happening in more detail.
It would be courteous if the letter to staff also went to the union
Yeah.
in Middletown.
Good idea.
I'll add that, staff and union.
Okay.
Other places we say Teamsters.
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay. And then we kind of have some placeholders like start date for legal consultation. Obviously, that's one that's going to keep going. See this. So the other thing you see, receive of the 5307 split agreement. That's how we get capital funding, is through split agreements. So that's what that kind of indicates. And that will be for all of our normal capital funding, but also included in there should be all the additional capital funding directly tied to this that we asked for fiscal year 2021. In May, we're planning that we start do the RFP for the human resources study, and we ask for hopefully get TODs for the new supervisor dispatch positions that were indicated in the study. start to begin sharing of technology. I would see that's going to be something that's going to spread over some time. And that includes the things that were specifically mentioned in the study were the automatic vehicle locating, which is AVL, scheduling software, and then I just put in other functions because there'll be other software too, maintenance software, other littler things that are that will all have to happen quick, all the different things we have to start using together. We also then have some capital items here, like the acquisition of non-revenue vehicles that was specifically support vehicles to allow us to move between the multiple facilities now. And also in there was something else. I think it was a shop truck. And start date to rebrand vehicles. Is that correct still? Start date to rebrand. I want to make sure that matches what we have somewhere else. Oh yeah. Well, I want to start on some of the rebrand. So the capital item that they had for rebranding covers a lot of things. So I wanted to get as much of that money now as possible because it's a broad range of things. It's bus stop signs. It's a lot of different things. So I had the start date there, but that's gonna be a lot of projects within one project. July, we hope to have implemented the new radios in Middletown so that we're on one radio system, which is the state radio system, which is what's being used at Estuary. And that we could hopefully start phasing in some sharing of functions, like, if we're now on the same software for scheduling, the same AVL and the same radios, we could start kind of more strategically moving where things happen. Not necessarily, hopefully we cannot have to schedule all of our, say, paratransit and dollar ride trips at the Middletown bus terminal, where it's kind of hard to do that because people are standing at the window talking to you, and they're also hearing sometimes what, or might see on the screen some private stuff. So kind of start shifting functions around between the sites as they make sense to do, which will all be possible once we're on the same technologies, right? We added the start date for the human resources study. Start date for, this is the kind of the placeholder, other special studies. I'm sure hopefully we'll start identifying some by then. July is also when we plan that we move we say support staff, and by that we mean basically everyone that's not covered on the Teamsters contract moves over to the ETD payroll. Hopefully fill those positions that we hope we have the TOD for in May. Start date. So yes, I probably should put an RFP there, but anyway, start the project of fare collection equipment. That's going to be a fun one. And do the RFP for the planning software. And then fall, start working on implementing joint work rules and operating policies.
So I have a question about that. Is this going to include anything that is a negotiable item that should be deferred until the union contract is negotiated? I mean,
all of it's, every bit of it's negotiable, but we could still implement it at any time. We don't have to wait. No, we don't. They have very little work rules in the contract, and we don't want them in the contract. However, they could always engage in what's it called? Impact, bargaining. So when we announce work rules, they have the opportunity. We would first inform them, and then they'll have the opportunity to come back and negotiate the impact of those work rules on them. So it doesn't have to be. It's actually probably better it not be coincided with the contract, because then they might want to put some in the contract, and we don't want that.
I see. Okay.
But yes, it will take some time to work through them, and because there's so little work rules now that they will definitely want to engage in bargaining. I can't imagine they wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so it'll take us some time to work through them.
Well, it's an opening, so for them, so they're going to try to take advantage of it.
Yep.
Well, that was my concern, Ed, that we're kind of handing them on a platter things that ordinarily they'd have to bring up and negotiate on their own.
No, no. Anytime you put out new work rules like that, they have the opportunity to engage in impact bargaining. So,
And there may be an argument that the change in working conditions is not material to the point that it forces negotiation. I mean, you can implement policies and procedures and rules in the workplace that don't necessarily constitute a change in working conditions that would be negotiable. So you got a lot of flexibility.
right, some of them, but with how little they have, there's going to be a lot of rules. So, some definitely will, and but it's clearly under management rights that we have the right to make work rules.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah.
It won't reopen the whole contract. They'll only be able to negotiate on these specific things.
Right.
They'll be able to negotiate the impact of the work rules on them.
You will probably find that there are a lot of things that you are codifying that were unwritten work rules already.
Right.
And that's not a change in working conditions. It's a past practice, but now you're putting it in writing.
Yeah, there's a lot of those. If we start from our work rules, which are pretty comprehensive.
Hold on, I'm gonna hang up and I'm gonna have to ask Joe to work with you. Okay, no problem. Joe, that was Joan.
Is she waiting to get in?
Trying to get in. I think she needs some help.
Okay, no, that's me. I got to let them in.
Oh, okay.
It was on a different screen, so I didn't see them.
Okay.
All right, they should be coming in.
All right. So we're good on the work rules and operating policies. And the rest of that looks pretty routine. I mean, not the substance of it, but the scheduling of it. Excuse me. You got her in, Joe?
I see Joan's here, and Beverly should be in too now.
Welcome, Joe.
She might be just by phone, so I don't see her.
I apologize profusely.
No problem. But we're almost through the implementation plan, Joe, and we're not going to go back over any of
No. And I reviewed all the documents, so I'm all set.
Okay. Joe, Beverly is Beverly there?
I saw she was in the waiting room, so I'm assuming she's on, but not on video, and that's why I don't see her.
Okay. Well, while Joe is dealing with that, are there any other questions on the remainder of the operations and staffing pieces in the implementation plan?
And I'll just say that in 2023 is when we have the remaining staff move over to ETD, because that would coincide with the new labor contract.
Okay.
For that's when the Teamsters move over.
You mean mainly the drivers then?
Yeah, for them right now it's entirely drivers. There's the Teamsters don't cover any other position but drivers at the moment.
Okay. All right.
So mechanics will have already moved, all those other positions.
Okay. There being no further comments, I'll just make one comment, which is when you do go through this and see all the things that need to happen, it's a little overwhelming. Joe and I have talked about that. He has an idea, a recommendation to make for us that we will discuss under staffing. But this would be Appendix F, the final document that gets attached to the MOA. There's a few changes that Joe will make based on our conversation today. I'd like to move now to the MOA document itself. And Dave, Joe, and I have made a number of changes to that, which are in red. Most of them, or part of them, are follow through on things we decided at our December 18th meeting. There are a couple of late starting changes that seem to be wise to consider, and those are in red as well. what I would like to do is to just highlight the options in red so that people can weigh in and let us know what they think about them. Under E, staffing, what we've added is a small section in number 3 that basically references the staffing study analysis from the survey, or the study rather, for scenario 3, so that there's understanding on their part of what our expectations are that these positions will be in terms of salary and benefits. Number 4 is a little more significant. Basically, what number 4 does is identify approval of these positions, these 3 positions, as a precondition for signing the MOA. It basically says that on or before the date this MOA is executed. Prior language indicated that these positions would be approved as soon as practicable after the MOA. What we're saying in this is that once you sign the MOA, those TODs have to be in place. Any comments or questions on that point?
Did we get the TOD for the maintenance director?
We did.
We did
Yeah.
since this last draft, we did.
So should that be deleted then?
We could.
I got it.
Okay. There's good news and bad news on the maintenance director, which we'll get to later.
Oh, that's not good.
Under finances, there's a change under F5 regarding Middletown debt. This was a recommendation by Dave, which I think is really good, which is that as soon as they sign the MOA DOT, all the debt will be considered forgiven, so that Middletown would not have to wait for, them to act on it. And we are going to have our attorneys take a look at that to make sure that the language we have in the MOA can actually effectuate that change. And any concerns, comments on that one?
No, that's good. That's good.
Okay, under facilities, H1, that is essentially just a reworking of language that was already there, but it does something new. There is this facility plan that now has to be approved by September 1st, and it provides for consultation with both ETD and MAT, as opposed to DOT simply doing it on its own. And similarly, it requires that both boards approve it. And this was something Joe suggested putting in, because in the past there have been problems with the DOT forging ahead on these things without adequate consultation with the districts, ending in a suboptimum product. So that's what that particular one is all about. Any comments, concerns? Okay. Under facilities, H4 is the indemnification section that was brought up at our meeting on December 18th. What we're aiming for here is something similar to the MAT debt, which is that by virtue of signing this MOA, DOT indemnifies both boards. Our attorneys are checking into whether we can effectuate the
Thank you
indemnification.
very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Under special studies is the same, additional capital projects. That is now Appendix E. And those projects, I don't think we've discussed at the larger committee meeting. Joe had to put those in for approval in January, which he did. And those include things like an upgrade to the AVL system, scheduling software, the radio system, rebranding, fare
Right.
collection, all that jazz.
I have it here.
Okay, it's in your packet as a special item of the meeting materials that were sent out. It's pretty straightforward. I don't know that anyone would have any concerns with that, but we've included timelines in there for activity start dates or procurement dates, so that DOT knows when we feel we have to execute these particular items in order to complete requirements of the timeline. Let's see. I think, let's see, JF 2F on your trolley bus. The copy I have has a purchase to be made by June 1st. Is that what's in there, Joe? We forgot to take that out.
Yes, I'd say funding.
Okay, Laura and I and Joe had talked about this and wanted to put a date certain in there for the trolley to be purchased. Joe tells us that June 1st is totally unrealistic. So what we thought we would do is remove any reference to a due date for when the trolley has to be purchased by, unless there's a date, Joe, that you think we could put in there that meets requirements.
At this point, it's probably gonna be hard for them to do it before the next federal fiscal year allocation.
So do we want a funding date in there? Not necessarily obtaining the
We
bus.
could
bus,
try. We could try. We're kind of getting tight because they don't. So Conduct doesn't actually tell you when they come up with capital items, when they come up with capital funding. I know about when it is, so that's why I sent them this other list of capital funding, which they said they knew nothing about. So it was very good that I sent it.
Oh.
Yeah. So, because remember, it's all different sides of DOT. So capital doesn't know what's going on in operating often. So that's why I said, I better send this over so I know that it's in there, and they could hopefully get it funded. But because this purchase will likely use federal funds, there's really just once a year that they divide that up. And it's about this time of year that they start making those plans. When that's formalized depends on when a federal budget's passed for the year, which hasn't occurred yet, even though we are 3 months into the federal fiscal year already. We're operating on a CR, so until we have a final budget, there won't be a final allocation of the funds and the final discussion. So it's a long way of saying we're right on the kind of the brink, depending on when a federal budget comes out, of when they could still stick it in for this year. So we could try, but they might come back and say, it's just too late to get it in this year.
So is it worth keeping the date in then?
Well, but as Ed said, we would have to change it to a funding by date because of the purchase takes some time, and there's an 18-month about backlog on ordering it because it's from Gillig, and Gillig has a long lead time.
Okay.
No, I looked at Appendix E, which was your recasting of the additional capital projects. The trolley is not in there.
No,
It's not technically merger related,
right.
so we
Okay.
decided to put it in the MOA instead.
Yeah.
So the question is, do we want to change this language a la Ed's suggestion that says funding for the purchase of a trolley bus for downtown Middletown service shall be committed by X date?
Yeah, I think June 1st is good. I think they could commit, possibly. I said they might come back and say it's too late.
You want to say so?
It's kind of.
Okay, so it would now read funding for the purchase of a trolley bus for downtown Middletown service. Operating costs for this service to be paid by the city of Middletown shall be committed by June 1st of 21.
Yeah, that's fine. And I'm going to suggest that instead of making this item 2F, that we separate it out and make it item number 3.
Okay,
And number 3 becomes number 4.
that's
Because
fine.
it's not part of, if it's not in the appendix, then it ought to be a standalone part of
Mhm.
commitment as part of the MOA.
Okay. All righty. That's fine. The next section is a new section entirely called merger financial requirements. Actually, I think merger funding requirements would be better. The purpose of this section is to place something in the MOA that deals with the overall size and scope of this project, this merger, and having all the parties acknowledge how much money it is we're talking about here. Appendix C includes copies of 3 figures or tables from the study that reference capital funding, increased operating funding, and increased funding for other capital items, which is what we discussed in section J. What this section also does is requires the DOT to identify and provide in writing to us the source of all these funds. As Joe indicated, that had been a suggestion made quite a while ago by Sam Gold. We're not asking them to commit to the funding. We're asking them to tell us where they're going to get it. You know, X is federal, X is operating DOT, X is capital DOT, whatever it is. And that there would be no requirement for any of these funds for additional local matching funds. This was an attempt to include a specific section in the document that acknowledges how much money this whole thing is going to cost. Comments, questions on that section? Agreement, disagreement?
Agree.
Okay. Let's see. The next is the merger implementation plan. We already discussed that. That was a new item. The last section is also new. We felt that there should be some mechanism for us to oversee what was happening and to provide a circuit breaker for us in the event that commitments aren't made or things aren't happening on the part of any of the parties with regard to this. And it basically suggests that there be an oversight committee that would include 1 representative from each board and 1 representative from DOT, as well as Joe, and that committee would meet regularly to oversee what was happening, to gauge progress, and to bring to the attention of the respective boards and parties any problems. The last part is probably the most significant, basically saying that, you know, in the event any party is unable or unwilling, it's agreed that progress on the merger will halt until the issues are resolved to the satisfaction of all parties. This is the circuit breaker, and it seems to be, well, I'll open it up for discussion.
I think it's succinct and it says what we want it to say. You know, we've talked about, we've all got our thoughts about what we need in order to want to move this, continue to want to move this forward. And I think that both groups had very similar concerns. And I don't see any reason to make a paragraph out of it. This is exactly what I think, exactly what it should say.
Anyone else?
Okay.
I agree. It gets the point across and that's it.
I
Okay,
agree.
alrighty. Thanks, everybody. So, Dave, we have a few more changes.
That's fine. What I'm going to do is not only make the changes, and Joe will have to furnish the new Appendix F, but I will send to Susan and Joe, and they can distribute to others, not only this version with the changes we've talked about today, but something that will look like the final document, where you don't have things in red and black and you don't have things in bold and underlined. We did that for our own benefit so we could see what were critical issues raised by both boards. But now eventually we're not going to highlight those things in the final version that DOT signs.
Correct.
So we'll have that. We'll put page numbers on it. I'll clean it up, and you can at least see what it might look like.
And the
Okay.
consultants are sending me all the charts that we want to use, all those figures that we want. They're splitting them out and sending them so we can have clean versions of them.
So we'll make these whatever editing changes we make, and also clean it up as Dave has identified. There is a draft copy of a transmittal letter which you asked to be provided. We did decide that both Joe and Leslie would be the signatories on this, and happy to accept any suggestions for changes on this particular letter. And another question on this is, should anyone, sorry,
Okay.
transmittal. Okay, so that's the letter up on the screen.
Mhm.
Does everyone feel that it does what we wanted it to do?
This is actually the first of its kind in Connecticut, a merger like this?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the kind of the point we're trying to make to them, is that they've wanted to do this for years.
Hmm.
So, you know, they could say that, oh, we're smaller districts and all that, but they gotta remember that this is the first, and it could be the last if they don't do it well. It could be the first of others if it's done well and it's successful. You know, so it could be a model for how you make strong transit districts in the state, or it could be a tale of a cautionary tale to other districts of why you should never do it. And that's all on DOT, how they want it to
Exactly. It's all on DOT.
And-
If DOT messes it up, it's gonna poison the
Right.
well going forward.
Right? And that's the point that, or, you know, Dennis is trying to make, like, this could, it's way beyond just these two districts. Even if you don't care about these two districts, you know, if you want less districts overall in the state, you want stronger districts, you have the potential to have a really strong example here of how it can be done.
Got to make it
Done well.
work.
And
So-
when Susan and I met with him, we highlighted how well we did when we merged our two RPAs. And you know, so that we have experience here. And
I think that we were probably one of the most successful in that too. Wouldn't you say, Laura?
oh, certainly.
I mean,
Mhm.
because I think you and I might be the only ones that were around at that time when that happened, and many other, because we did it early, we did it voluntarily, and we committed to it. Ours came out really well, and other areas really struggled.
Mhm. Okay, well, if there is time, if you have a chance and you want to go back and reread this or make any suggestions, please feel free to do so. Should we be copying anybody? Joan, go ahead. You're muted, Joan. Joan, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I just had one comment to make, that in that first paragraph,
Okay.
the word approval. Do we really want to say their approval, or would concurrence do?
Concurrence is better, I think. I think that's a good change.
The last word.
Yep, we can make that change for sure. Who should receive a copy of this? Besides, I mean, this is going to go directly to the commissioner. with the attachment. We are, as we discussed, neither board chair will sign it. It will be transmitted unsigned. But we say in here that we have total agreement and we're prepared to sign it. Should any other individual in DOT receive this? Joe, will it be moved through the system quickly, or will it take weeks for it to get from the commissioner's office down to Dennis?
If you want him to have it, I would CC anybody you want to have it.
Well-
They're not necessarily quick.
Normally, I wouldn't be too solicitous of Dennis. However, he's made it very clear in a response to Laura and me and Joe from an email we sent yesterday asking for the status of these new positions. He's made it very clear that he's not doing anything on those positions until he gets something that he can look at. He even suggested, sending him a draft, which I'm uncomfortable doing. But I would opt then to CC him on this so he gets it as soon as the commissioner does, because the sooner he gets it, purportedly, the sooner he will be able to act on the TODs for these positions. What do the rest of you think?
Well, I agree with the CC for one reason, the way communication exists within agencies, in that the commissioner would say, probably go down, are you aware of this? What do you probably go, rather than sign and get going down the level to Dennis or the deputy commissioner and say, are you aware of this? Do you have any suggestions to make? So I think copying Dennis on, I think, would be positive. Because otherwise Dennis can say, I don't know anything about it. Then he'll be annoyed about that and we'll be back where we were.
Should we copy Eucalypto?
I think you
He's
should.
The deputy commissioner? Does that mean Andreski has to be copied too?
Yes.
All right, all three of them. We have to copy everybody to get it to Dennis, right?
Yeah.
All right, so it'll be Eucalypto, Andreski, and Selensky. Can't hurt to have a lot of copies of this floating around DOT, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, once again, if you have any other suggestions, they're welcome and invited. So, and there's still a little bit of time. All righty, so we've got pretty much the MOA is we're very close to finalizing it. Other than these editing changes we made today. The next item on the agenda is the schedule to finalize the MOA. And for those of you who have time constraints, I think we can do the rest of the meeting in about 10 minutes. The schedule that Laura and I and Joe talked about is very aggressive, but hopefully we can do it. Today, obviously, we've reached consensus, and Joe has already sent, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, draft copies to our respective legal counsel for review.
No, I just told them it was coming, and then I'd have it right after this meeting.
Okay. Next week from the 18th through the 21st, we are anticipating and expecting legal to get back to us with any comments. Is that realistic, Joe?
I think so.
Okay. Friday, January 22nd, or early the next week, we would call another meeting of this group to approve the final product and make a recommendation that it be approved by our respective boards. Also, the week of the 25th, our boards would call special board meetings to approve this MOA and send it to DOT. And then the week of February 1st, it would actually physically be transmitted to DOT. So this schedule requires three things. It requires legal to do a quick and hopefully pithy review of this within the first 4 days of next week. it requires us to set up another meeting of this group to finalize recommendation to the full boards. And it requires each of the boards to schedule a special meeting on this topic alone. Is this, to all of your minds, doable? We have a regularly scheduled meeting on the 29th. If we wait for that meeting for us to make a recommendation, we could push the special board meeting back until the week of February 1st and hope that we can still get the document in the hands of DOT by the end of that week. Does that make more sense? To keep our meeting scheduled on the 29th for our final review of legal and all of this? I'm concerned that legal's going to come up with something that for changes that we will need to discuss and keep moving on, and that we might not have the time to get this to DOT early in February. But for those of you who have day jobs and know how councils work, your specific councils, is this schedule something that's realistic?
I say we keep a tight schedule and even be willing to have a special meeting unscheduled right now to address any legal concerns.
Yeah, let's see what the
That's-
feedback
yeah.
is on a legal end, and if, as soon as we get that, maybe we can schedule a meeting.
That was my thought. Let's see if we might not, I anticipate we will. I mean, what would a lawyer do if not comment on something that we write?
Yeah.
But
Right.
I think we can generate a special meeting to address that.
Do you want to schedule that now or do you want to wait?
We'll wait.
Okay. All right. I'm comfortable with that. Alrighty. The next issue is on the agenda is staffing discussion. We do have some new.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I don't hear you, Susan.
I'm in a meeting.
She's
Hang on.
back.
She's
For a
no
status
connect.
update.
There we go.
These two-
Susan, you cut out for about a minute, so
Oh,
And you're,
start
I'm
over.
sorry.
and
Okay,
you're still
I'll-
breaking up a little.
Okay, sorry. I'll address the HR and grants and procurements positions. Laura and I sent an email to Dennis Solinsky on yesterday asking for a status update on his approval on these things. He did respond to us, which in and of itself noteworthy. But he also indicated there that until he sees something tangible from us, like even a draft of the MOA, he will not be approving any of these positions. What Joe and I talked about was using our own respective funds for him to go out and advertise now for these positions. It's not a big financial commitment. We wouldn't hire unless we had the TOD. But this way, if we just keep waiting for written approval from them, we will waste more and more time. It's already been a month since Laura and I raised this issue as an acute problem with him. And on the one hand, on the other, I don't think that I can blame him for wanting to see some proof of progress on this issue, which receiving a copy of the MOA would certainly do. So that's one issue.
Do you have job descriptions? Because my guess is that that's when he's looking for documentation, it's not a draft TOD.
Oh, no.
It's,
No,
it would be to have a job description that gave him
He's
confidence.
he approved that already.
Oh,
He's-
okay.
No, he
Dave-
very specifically said he wants a draft MOA.
He
Oh,
wants, that's what he wants.
He wants to know that we are we are continuing to move this forward before he sticks his neck out any further.
Okay. And his point is that he already approved the TOD for the maintenance director. And there's good news and bad news on that. The good news is he approved the TOD. The bad news, Joe, is
our top candidate has personal issues and may not be able to accept it, even though he initially did, but then some things changed in his home situation and he may not be able to. I'm hoping to hear, planning that I should hear today whether he'll be able to accept the position or not. And we don't have any strong number twos at this point.
okay. So in the meantime, you would continue to advertise?
Yeah, the ad's back up.
Okay. The third aspect is a recommendation that Joe is making to us to consider a new position related to the study. So Joe, or the merger rather, why don't you fill everybody in, Joe, on what you're proposing?
Yeah, so when Susan laid out the implementation plan in this new format, she said to me and said, I don't know how we're going to accomplish all this. And it was really that we said, you know what, you're right. It is a lot when you lay it out. And so I said, well, it's possible that we can use our, CARES money, which we just got a lot more of. Both organizations just got a lot more CARES money. FTA wants it spent as soon as possible. And so we said, well, maybe we do a special projects person that's a temporary position, like temporary being, and we decide what that is. It's probably at least 18 months, maybe it's 2 years to finally see everything through in completion. But really the job is to take on a lot of these special projects that come out of this combining of the two agencies. So I just come up with some quick things like getting the AVL project done, because that is a big undertaking. It took us a year to do our AVL, and it's going to take probably at least 6 months to get that done. Each one of these things just has so much following up, all these studies, the fair study, all this. Somebody needs to be that constantly on, working with the consultants, and we're going to have lots of them. The bus stop, the service recommendations, when we talk about starting to implement some of those service recommendations, that's a lot of hearings and all that stuff to manage. The fair proposals is a lot of work to manage. And as I said, there's 5 studies or 6 studies listed. And I even come up with a few more things. But so anyway, there's a lot of projects that are going on over these next year and a half, 2 years that really could use somebody keeping them moving and being the point person on them all, and spearheading a lot of these projects, because you look at that, it's already a long list, but then you figure in addition you still got to run the day-to-day on 2 organizations, and you still have to merge 2 entities. A lot of that's not even in here, just all the other little things that have to happen to merge 2 entities. We've only put the big things on here. There's a lot of small stuff. So that was the thought that would certainly help get us through this period.
Joe also, he indicated that this would be funded out of our existing funding. It would not require DOT approval. We could advertise and hire and get someone on board quickly. And that it would not require specific approval by either board because it is within the current approved budget. Is that correct, Joe?
Right. So it wouldn't require formal approval. Of course, we would want their
formal
concurrence, but it doesn't require like a budget change or anything because it's already in the budget, because we always adopt our budgets. Our budgets are always larger than we end up getting funding from Conduct, because we never know what we're getting when we adopt our budget.
Right. So if one of the things that could be discussed is this position at the special board meeting that gets called to approve the final MOA. So the question is everyone in agreement out a special project manager and going out now to use their own funds to start advertising for the other two positions, the HR position and the grants position. Is there a general agreement? I don't think we need a formal motion, but
So would this special project, would this be funded out of both districts?
Yeah.
Yeah, 50/50.
The special
or
projects one,
something?
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I was telling Susan that as far as the advertising for those other two positions, I mean, we're probably talking between $500 and $1,000. And since we're having a delay in the hiring of the maintenance person, we can use that. The new TOD money we just got.
oh, okay.
Joe, are we considering this a temporary position?
Yes. Yeah, I would hire it with that it's a, whatever we say, I don't know if we say it's 18 months, probably to be safe, we say it's probably through the end of, say, December 31st of 2022, just because, things aren't going to magically end on July 1. There'll still be stuff to wrap up.
So
Yeah,
you'll be hiring somebody with an employment contract.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You probably want to try to bring somebody in at least to end of 2022.
Yeah.
We
that was
all
my
know,
thinking.
we all run, those of us that run towns, we all know that we're shorthanded on when it comes to staff to help us and so on. And I can't imagine that the last thing you need on your plate is extra layers of work.
Yeah. Well, that's what, in the study we came up with the positions needed to make the organization run when it's done. They didn't put in anything to make all this happen, which once we laid it out, it is a lot. And so
it's considerable.
So this is specifically to make this all happen, to help make this all happen. The other positions are needed to keep the place running on a day-to-day in the future, but they still don't make up for all the additional work coming on these next couple of years. So
do you think that First Transit has anyone available that they can come up for us?
That's certainly a possibility that
Yeah.
we could add to one of our contracts.
Mm-hmm.
It might be an easy way to do it because they could probably more easily find somebody for a temporary period with experience than we could on their own. So I could find out what that pricing would be if that's a consensus, just so we could weigh it as an option.
Yeah, an option anyway.
Sure, I think it makes sense to
I think
find.
it's a really, I think it's a good option.
Yeah, because First Transit often has people between locations and stuff that might be able to come out for a while. So yeah.
So as there seems to be general agreement on this special project manager position, short-term, shared equally by the districts, and Joe getting out there as quickly as possible with that, which I suspect Joe would be sometime after the special board meetings take place.
On the special projects person?
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be right after that. And then the other two I could start, because we already have job descriptions, I could start those. I could do that this afternoon if we wanted to move forward on that.
I'm in favor of that. How does everybody else feel? Let's get that advertising out there. It's going to take a while to find these.
I don't want to put Dave Lee on the spot here, but I don't know if you'd be interested.
Thanks. And there's a lot I can do to continue to help as long as First Transit's willing to consider that part of their obligation. But I think you're looking for someone who's going to be more of a full-time employee for a limited period of time, and that's not me.
Someone like Dave is exactly my thought. Like someone who's kind of just at the end of their career and wants to, or looking for a good post-retirement short-term job.
You're too young to know this, but nobody else on this call wants to be described as being at the end of anything.
Well, I know Dave does not want a full-time job, right? But
right.
Someone who's like just,
He can't be a grandpa if he's got a full-time job doing something else. Okay. Alrighty, so we're good on the staffing discussion. I do not think we need an executive session at this point. And the discussion of bylaws, I think we will defer until after the MOA is wrapped up. So next steps, here's what we have. Legal review will take place as soon as possible. Our board, our joint committee will be on alert for a special meeting to endorse the final product once we get feedback from legal. We will begin advertising immediately for HR, payroll, grants and procurements. We will inform and get consensus from our boards on the special project manager when we meet to discuss the final MOA. We will, I'll write a draft letter for a side letter agreement between the districts to formalize shared staffing. And someone will write a draft letter that would be sent out to staff as an update after the MOA is executed. Are there any other next steps?
I have a thought or a question regarding the letter, the cover letter that goes along with that MOA
Okay.
to the commissioner. I know we can't date it yet, but it takes a while to get it from me and back and forth to Ed and blah, blah, blah. So if that letter gets ready for signatures, we can pre-sign it if that's agreeable, but just to have it ready to roll.
Okay, good suggestion. We'll put something like that in place, Leslie. Alrighty, our next regularly scheduled meeting is, oops, that was wrong on the agenda too, is January 29th at 11 a.m. And by the way, I think Beverly was confused by the agenda and had intended to attend. So we will meet one way or another on January 29th with the potential for an additional meeting sometime between now and then, depending on the status of the legal review. Are there any other new business or old business? Any business?
Joan has some, but she's got to unmute yourself, Joan.
Yeah, I am. I just did that. Just to follow up, unless I missed it, Dennis Zelensky says he wants a copy of the draft MOA before we send it out officially. Does that mean we send him one in advance and then also copy him on the letter and the documentation we send to the commissioner?
Okay, Joan, there's a little bit of a nuance here. What he said was he would not proceed with the approval on these two positions unless he saw something like a draft. He wasn't saying, I want myself.
Okay.
Schedule that we've talked about today, the MOA going February is probably going to be sufficient, especially since Joe's going to start advertising today anyway. So we aren't going to lose that time. Did I explain that properly? I don't think we need to send him a draft, in other words. I think that we're fine sending him, copying him on the transmittal of the final document.
I just wanted to verify that.
Yeah, it was,
I
I apologize.
don't think there's no
ahead,
good reason to send him a draft at this point.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for your participation in this. I know it's a lot of work and it's been a very aggressive schedule, but I think we're almost there. So
I have one question, tiny question.
Yep.
Has our legal counsel been given heads up that this doc is coming in?
Well, I spoke to Middletown's, and I'm going to let know too, but Middletown's, we wanted them to pay special attention to a couple of things like the debt and that wording. So, and I let him know the schedule. I'll let, Suzanne, I always want to say Marianne first. Susanna.
Yeah, it's Suzanne, yeah.
I know. I still always want to say Marianne Kilby.
Yeah.
because she was our attorney for so long, but so I just got on her schedule.
Yeah,
But-
I'm just concerned that they have that time set aside for this review, that
Right.
we
Yep.
don't lose a week because.
And
Yes.
Okay,
let her know time is of the essence here,
Yes.
that we're more important than anything else she's got on her desk.
absolutely.
She's
Oh.
hopefully she'll be quick.
Okay. Any other new business, old business?
Just
And then-
thank you. I want to thank Sue, Joe, and Dave for the work you're putting in.
You're
This is really come a long way in a fast time. So thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank
thank you all.
Appreciate it. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
And a
Second.
second, the meeting is
Let's go.
adjourned at 12:36. Everyone have a wonderful weekend and thank you again for all your time.
Yeah,
Bye,
bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.